TPA.
I have that too, man, but I'm lazy to go and change.
Am I still out? Hello?
But it's okay now, it's okay.
Okay, I have
Yep,
to
yep.
maybe move the phone away from my
Alright, that's
mouth a bit.
better. I'm happy, you know.
Okay. Good. So we are live on Facebook now.
Really?
Not
That's-
Facebook, YouTube. I mean, it's really just for the purpose of recording it.
Okay.
So don't fret.
Sure.
Want to do a short rundown of what?
Oh, sorry, I shouldn't tell them about that thing, right, Mark?
No,
Okay.
no, definitely not.
I won't tell them your
Are you guys
secret.
picking up audio from the traffic?
No, we're okay.
It's not like going to riot or something.
Right. So, we're coming up
Fish.
to around 10. I guess we can look to start proper at 10, but maybe before we begin with the proper discussion, Jensen, do you want to kind of get us all on the same page as to why we are all here, all 7 of us? 7, yes.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I kind of wanted to have this discussion sometime back before I went to China, but things got delayed and I ended up only organizing it after I went to China. That was rather silly of me. But I just feel that it's good to have some discussion about these kind of things, get people together and get people talking, and get some consensus as to how we can move the scene forward. Because I don't think that there has been this kind of discussion on a public forum since I think there was one did by Games in Asia back in 2014 or something like that. It was a long time ago since we had significant people in the scene come together and say that, okay, this is the problems that we're facing at the moment, and this is how we must tackle them. This is why I've gathered everybody here today, and kind of the format I was looking towards. I was looking at subject matter experts in the form of Rain, who I saw as a very HR coaching kind
Okay,
of
hang
figure.
on. Is anybody else having trouble hearing Jensen?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, Jensen, you kind of broke up in your last, like, one sentence. Just repeat what you last said.
Okay, so the kind of format I was looking at in terms of like analysts is I guess
I-
just
This is not working. Jensen's a robot. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Jensen.
I'm gonna turn on my VPN and see if it gets better.
Okay.
I've reduced location in Singapore.
Okay. We'll wait for Jensen to get that done.
Yep.
Do you think it'll make it easier, or better, or worse?
You can try. You can try. Oh, and if you guys are wondering why I'm like not looking at my webcam, it's because I have 2 screens. So I put you guys on the bigger one, and my webcam's
Wow,
actually
rude.
here.
I'm not even gonna be on. No, I refuse to be on the screen now.
No, I need space to look at my notes.
No,
I have 3 screens.
how dare you?
Your setup's
So-
more professional than mine, Henry.
I'm not even looking at your
Oh.
faces, I'm using a phone.
Free mic.
Where am I supposed to get the YouTube shit?
Oh yeah, I can give you guys the link. 1 second.
Yes, please send that. Ow.
Oh, Fish is so handsome.
It's worse with the VPN, so I'll do it without the VPN.
Okay.
It's worse without a VPN. What?
No, it's worse with the VPN.
Uh-huh.
I tried a VPN to Singapore. It's like the same way people VPN to Korea to play
Yep.
there.
Mark, can you
Yeah.
send me the link on Facebook?
On Facebook. Okay, I put it in the YouTube chat as well.
Yes.
But I'll put it into the Facebook chat right now.
Wait, you
Yes.
put the link for the live stream in the YouTube chat, which we need the link for.
The Skype chat. The Skype chat.
Put it in the Facebook chat, please. I can't even.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm putting it in the Facebook chat.
Okay.
Brilliant.
But yeah.
Jackie, where are you?
Outside my corridor.
Why don't you go in?
My baby is sleeping. Hello, guys.
Okay. Adulting 101. All right, it's in the Facebook chat as well.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, so yeah, just to pick off where Jensen kind of left off as he was trailing. So we were chatting a bit about it. So I think Jensen, I'll just cover for you, and if you feel like I'm missing something, I'll just step in. I think,
Sure.
Yeah, definitely recognizing that it has been quite.
Hang on 1 second, Mark. Could you do me a favor?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Could you turn off the chat in the stream? That way people cannot see everyone's ID.
Turn off the chat in the
That's-
stream.
Skype is very DDoS. Don't like it.
So you mean
Just hide the chat. Then it's harder, basically.
Hide the Skype chat.
hide the
That-
Skype chat, not the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there we go. Yeah. Is that correct? No, it keeps popping up. Hold up. Full screen. Why does it keep coming back in? What if I do it like this? No? Does it still show up on yours?
I'm not looking, I just noticed when I turned it first.
Can the rest of you still see the Skype chat?
I'm not on
Right.
YouTube.
I can.
If I do, what if I, no. So I full screened already, so I don't see the chat on my
And-
screen.
But that should be fine.
Probably it's a stream delay or something.
Maybe. Oh, yeah, it's okay now.
Let's see then. Whoa.
Whoa, dogs barking in the background.
All right. Well, let's all have the understanding that some of us are in corridors and stuff, and just make do. No worries, guys. No worries. Okay, so I think just to pick off where Jensen was trailing off, it's definitely rather rare that we can get together. People who are professionals in the industry, part-timers, players themselves, and I think looking at the industry and not just a particular game is something we want to keep in mind, that we do have that kind of experience here as well, which I think will be very interesting to hear beyond just the perspective of, say, one game, which obviously many of us come from. So I think three main things that we're going to be looking at today, guys, would be the first, challenges and transitions from the amateur kind of scene or phase into the professional, and that whole kind of period in between, and what the establishment of organizations can do. So structures, and how structures can help with that. And then the second thing would be, what kind of activities should these organizations be doing? What kind of structure do we think would be helpful to aid in that kind of transition from amateur to pro? And then I think number three would just be general commentary and analysis on the regional dynamics of esports here, right? In Singapore in particular, and of course, Fish, you can speak about your experience from Oceania, and that would be very helpful as well. Okay, so that'll be the bulk of the conversation for tonight. And I think the ideal outcome would be that ideally after all our conversations and our brainstorming together, some kind of semblance of a way forward, to make some kind of impact on the scene, I think would be the ideal. But we'll see how far we get with that. I think the important thing is to start this conversation and see where we go. Everybody still with me? Still good?
Yep.
Yep.
Good. So I think some of us are also just kind of meeting for the first time or not too familiar with one another. So why don't we just do a quick round of introductions? Your name, maybe what you're doing right now, and I think just for fun, guys, like what gets you excited when you hear the word esports? Okay, like what comes to your mind, and you're like, oh yeah, esports is awesome because. And you just fill in that line. Also for whoever's watching this stream, if you guys want to publicize it, then this is a good time for people to intro as well. So I'm just gonna follow the order of profiles that I see on my Skype.
Yeah.
Wow.
Jeff,
Your mic-
I think you should mute your mic.
Is it the vibration or something like that? Do you pick up anything like a vibration?
Yeah, there's like traffic
car.
in the background.
It's
Is
bad.
it is that like a vibration or what? Or is it traffic?
Traffic.
It's probably traffic.
Traffic.
You can just
I'll
mute
read
your
your
mic and then unmute
Yeah.
and talk.
All right.
Okay. So, Jensen, why don't you begin? And then I'll just put the order in the. Okay. Jensen, why don't you begin?
What am I supposed to say again? Okay, I'm currently coaching. LSPL, is soon to be LVL in China, and I used to run Vestigio back in 2016. That was back in Singapore. And what makes me excited about esports is it?
Yeah.
Actually,
right.
this is something quite interesting. It's not just esports, but competitive gaming in general. Because I was kind of an outcast in school, so a lot of my time was spent playing competitive games like Magic the Gathering, and that's how I really expanded my social circle. So when I think of esports, and what really makes me excited is the social aspect of it, and how it creates this very interesting social dynamic between new groups of people, where you see people from polytechnics and JCs and universities just transcending all these usual classes that we have in Singapore coming together.
Okay, cool. So the social cohesion aspect, very nice. All right, thank you for that intro. Jackie, you're next.
So, okay. So my name is Jackie. I'm currently the events manager for Spark 360, previously from Garena and Game Asia as well. So what got me excited in esports? Everything. The community, the hype, and basically the excitement that comes out from it,
The hype. Okay.
So, yeah. So Worlds in Singapore was a big hype for me. We went there and the crowd was awesome. But not too sure whether we can repeat the crowd again in Singapore. So, yeah.
Okay, and we'll definitely be getting your thoughts on being an events manager in all those different companies. Be very helpful. Okay.
Sure thing.
Lino, you're next. Hammy.
Let me unmute. Yes, hi. Currently, I'm sort of semi-retired, so.
Alright, we got the old guard to speak for us. Okay.
Yeah. So, what got me into esports was, basically I love gaming. I love the competitive side of it. Playing against people you don't know, and working with your teammates, and sort of similar to Jensen's story, I guess. Being able to work as a team, team sports. That's what interests me about esports, I guess.
Okay, very cool. All right, I'm next. My name is Mark. I'm currently a fourth-year student at Yale and US College, also a part-time shoutcaster at Garena. I think when I think of esports, I really think of how the free game that you can download and play is just a completely different world from the competitive element, and it's fascinating to see that kind of change. Even though it's supposedly the same game, it's really quite different, and you have all these elements of monetization and teamwork, team management, organization management that comes to mind when I think of esports. So really an interesting environment to be in that you just don't get to see when you're sitting and playing the game on your own. So that's what I think of when I think of esports, and why I think these kind of conversations are very interesting. Okay, next, Matt.
Hello. Hi, so I'm Matthew Stewart. Most people know me as Fish. I used to for Garena full free. I also shoutcasted with Garena originally, casting the GPL and the TLC. Now I am working at Riot Games as the shoutcaster and social media manager. What really got me, what makes me excited about esports is I've never met somebody in. Okay, no, that's a lie. I've only met very few people in esports who would tell me that this is not just a job for them. Everybody, or most people I've met, tell me they're very passionate and they're doing it because they're passionate about it. It's not just a way to make ends meet. So that got me very excited about the community and made me very happy working with the community.
Okay, awesome. That passion. Very, very cool. All right, next, Rain.
Okay, so right now I'm the coach for Resurgence, which is, I would say, the team that represented Singapore for the latest GPL split. And what gets me excited about esports is not so much about the crowd, not so much about the hype, but I think what goes into actually bringing the steps required to bring the players up onto the stage, the amount of effort and amount of work that you really need to get the players ready and prepared for the games. And that's the kind of competitive spirit that I really enjoy watching and working with as well the players. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We're definitely going to hear about your experience as a coach and really moving people, right, like from their own rooms playing their game and onto a big stage. We've seen that effect even some of our best amateur to pro players. So coach is very integral to that. All right, and last but not least, Jafe. You can unmute yourself now. Hello, are you there? Jafe?
We've lost him.
Chief!
Jafe, come back.
He's still
Where?
probably playing now.
Don't be
Hi,
sad,
hi.
Jafe.
Hello, hello. No, it's hard for me to unmute the mic. I have to go through like 4 screens. Anyway, hi. Most people know me as Babel, I guess. I used to be a caster for Heroes of the Storm. I've been around for a couple of years. And now I run my own team called Resurgence, and we are fairly new, so please have mercy on us.
Okay.
What gets me excited about esports is the fact that it's personally it's a merger of a lot of things. It's a merger of my passion to speak. It's a merger of my love for gaming. It's also more importantly what I would say as the way to the future. You see a lot more young ones these days just playing games, not so much on the outdoors, very much playing their own phone game or maybe even computer game, and it's something that I think connects with the younger generation. So when they grow up, effectively they are not going to be as connected to the traditional sports that we are used to. They're going to be a little bit more interested in competitive gaming, and I think that this is a bright path for a lot of people where you have the possibility of being on the forefront to create something brand new. I think this excites a lot of people, not just me. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much, Jay, for that. And guys, definitely, I'm here to moderate it, but we'll just let the conversation flow, because I think many of us brought up a lot of points about, say, the passion of esports, the various mechanics in putting together a team, running an organization, and I think Jafe as well, just to kind of spring off what he said, it's definitely very exciting because things are changing with how accessible I think it is now. I mean, again, we just take a game like League of Legends, for example, which many of us have experienced on. You can download it, climb up the solo ranks, and if you put the word out, if you get the word out there, you could probably find an amateur team to get started, right? So I think let's jump into the nature of that right away, going back to that first point that I brought up before we all introduced ourselves, the challenges and the transitions that we face, or the amateur scene faces to go pro, basically, and the role of, I think, organizations in that is something we do want to cover beyond just kind of the psychological elements of this is a competitive versus casual. I think that's something we can talk about, but also I think the role of, say, a team or an organization, and I think there are many different ones of us that can contribute to that. So anybody would like to take that up right away?
So, hopefully my mic doesn't cut off by talking to them, but let's give some context to this. So, we've seen the sports industry kind of grow over the last 3 years. I think
Jensen, you're getting cut off.
I think you gotta type, Jensen.
I'm gonna pass on telling this, so I'm gonna try to keep my answer short. So no exposition, please.
Robo Jensen. Well, you're a YouTube favorite, Jensen. If that's any consolation.
Somebody else.
Okay.
I'll reply more when I'm called on.
Right. Okay. But I think what Jensen was trying to say is that perhaps a little bit of context to these issues would be good. So maybe we can start with our general impressions of the esports industry or scene. Let's start with Singapore, but Fish, of course, you can still chime in, say with relevant comparisons to OCE, and let's just start with a very simple question: what do we think is one thing that is going well now, or again, we could use one thing that we see is exciting about the development of esports in Singapore. Okay, so we're gonna start with the positive first, okay, guys. I know a lot of us in our conversations before have had a lot of criticism, but let's start with the positives. So, anybody want to go first? What's working well in Singapore in terms of esports?
It's one thing that's very underappreciated is VSATs. And as the guy wearing the Giga Vice green shirt to know, the number of times he denied the opportunities to go overseas and play a tournament because of the other esports was just so many. Yes, we're gonna play all tournaments. We can go overseas and play some cash royale tournament without the money visa or anything.
Oh man, Jensen, you're still Robo Jensen.
I agree with Jensen. So what Jensen's trying to say is Singapore esports teams in Singapore, from my memory, have never really been denied going to an international tournament due to their citizenship. We've seen multiple teams from not only Vietnam, but also we've seen teams from the Philippines being denied entry into countries to participate in certain tournaments. I believe one of the first times around that this really affected a competition was when Mineski won the Southeast Asian regionals, because they were the second place team from the Philippines who were stepping in for, I don't remember what the team was at the time, who beat Mineski in the finals. And if they were the second place team, we can only imagine how well that first place team from the Philippines would have done if they represented in Southeast Asia. So that's a really good thing. The fact that the passport from Singapore is very strong allows players to enter international events a lot easier than someone else, and potentially would allow them to migrate to other countries much easier as well to play for teams too.
Okay, so definitely something that's often underlooked or underappreciated. Yeah, Jackie, did you have something you wanted to chime in on?
No, I just feel that recently, if you can see, right, there's a lot more events going on. Probably more to one-off events, but it's encouraging to see more and more brands, even like shopping malls actually willing to come in to do things that's related to esports. So this is something very positive that we are seeing in Singapore currently. Yep.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have something.
Okay, let me go first.
Yeah, because I have to mute my mic, so it's quite bad. Anyway, something exciting, I think, for all of us, for me personally also, is the fact that you have a lot more quote-unquote well-funded organizations in the scene now compared to before. Why I would say that is because it seems like there is something, okay, this is going to sound like a really bad pun, but it sounds like there's a bit of a resurgence in the organizations in that we see today. Yeah, and
casual
it's a
marketing.
bad pun. It's just a bad pun, all right? And the reason why I say this is because you used to have some really good teams with I would say even SGS, where they play their players really well. And then that kind of died off after a little bit, where you have a period where you have multiple organizations who aren't really as invested in the scene, but they're just there. And players just play under their banner, and that's about it. And then all of a sudden, you see some strong brands coming back in. I think Impunity is one of them. Well, I'm fairly new, so I don't count. And you also have Chaos Theory, the elephant in the room, quote-unquote first professional esports team. So I would say that this is something exciting. It signifies change. It signifies that there are people willing to invest in Singaporean esports, and I think it also is a step in the right direction. If you would say that's a good thing, yeah.
Okay, so definitely I think the corporate aspect. It all sounds very businessy, but I guess in some sense it is. I think JP brought up a good point that ever since SGS disbanded or yeah, I mean, it was all well when SGS was around. Everyone was like, "Oh man, a fully sponsored team," and I think Fish, in some of your comments to Jensen's questions, in preparing for this, was that that helped build a team identity. When you had that kind of strong corporate backing and you had even a stadium to visit, I think that's all something we looked at. But then once SGS disbanded, it did seem like maybe investor confidence took a hit.
Can I add on a little bit? Can I add on a little bit to Jeff's point? It's not just a resurgence of organizations. In fact, there seems to be a lot of speculation, and there seems to be a lot of attention being paid to esports in general. So it's not just Infinity. Skoga came in, they partnered with the National Youth Council, and actually in 2016, Nelson and I, we were approached by Singtel as well, and they were also looking at plans as well. So, okay, how can we make esports a thing in Singapore as well? So there's a lot of agencies, government as well as private sector out there, and actually we do see Spout 360 as well coming in with very big VC money. There's a lot of organizations coming in, and it's just a question of, is there a strategy? If there's a strategy, we're going to move forward with that. So that kind of brings us into the big question that I think we are trying to tackle today, is figuring out what could be a possible working plan strategy-wise and how to move forward with these kind of things.
Okay. Yeah, I did note the YouTube thing. I'll get that fixed as soon as I can. But I think, Rain, why don't you share from your perspective then? Because I think definitely one thing we often hear or see is, from a corporate perspective, it's all this planning, it's all this good stuff. But do you feel like that's translated, down to yourself as a coach or your players' experience? Do they see the scene in the same way?
I honestly don't have a lot of positive comments or positive impressions about the scene improving as a whole, because I think the one event recently that really crippled a lot of esports players' impressions of the scene was the cut in prize money for SLS, which used to be called TLC, but right now it's called the Singapore Legends Series. So the cut in prize money was a very big hit to a lot of people, because I think a lot of players were driven a lot by extrinsic motivation. So to them, that was, I think the prize pool was originally about 30K? Was it 30K?
Yep.
Now it's about only 5K. No, 5K? I forgot the numbers.
10K.
10K, is it? Yeah, 10K. So it's actually more than 50% cut, if I'm not wrong. It's very big. One-third cut. Yeah, it's one-third cut. Okay, so it's really big, and yeah, people, a lot of players see this as a step backwards instead of a step forward, because they directly correlate the progress of a scene to the prize pool of the competition. So if the prize pool is increasing, then we feel like that there's progress in the scene and things like that. But that's something that I don't really see as a sustainable relationship. Why do I say so? Is because I feel that organizations in Singapore should be gradually more and more self-sustainable, which means that I don't feel that organizations should be using primarily prize pools as their main source of revenue or main source of sustainability. So yeah, I think that's why most people are actually most of the players are actually very disappointed with the League of Legends scene right now in Singapore.
So would anybody like
that's...
Yeah. Go ahead, Fish. Yeah.
Just add on to that.
Fish is getting cut off.
Yeah, now Fish is lagging.
D word as well. Oh, that was just not happening. Oh,
It's not just me, right? Fish has gone robo.
alright.
Oh no, Fish! Aren't you in Singapore, Fish?
Oh!
What's happening?
I am. Is it still bad?
It's pretty bad, yeah.
Yeah, your face is
My
not
laptop
moving.
to the ceiling and hope it works. Oh no.
Well, maybe
Oh.
while we're waiting
Oh.
for Matt to try and...
Can you hear me though, or am I still...
It gets choppy, yeah.
But... Can you... No! What the... very sad now.
Okay, hopefully we get this resolved soon, guys. But maybe we can talk a bit about that, and anybody feel free to chime in, right? I mean, I don't have an expert opinion on this, but there does seem to be, not to discount a lot of the, say, entrepreneurship or new initiative from, say, Skoga and other companies, that are getting more involved in esports now, but it does seem like there is nonetheless a pretty consistent gap, whether it's perception, like Rain, you mentioned that the players themselves just have these expectations which are perhaps unfair, but how do we see that gap between how the industry projects itself, as something that is very professional and lucrative, but doesn't seem to be quite experienced by the players on the ground, and maybe some people who come from these organizations yourself can speak to perhaps why there seems to be a gap in perception or experience. I think that would be quite interesting to share perspective on.
I think Fish looks good now to talk.
Hello?
Yeah?
Am I still a robot?
No, you're smoother now. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to touch on the last point before you move on, which
Sure.
is a key word I heard there is the players are the ones that are very disappointed. The cut in price pool. Mostly the professional players and the fans as well of the tournaments, because as was mentioned, there's a big correlation between, this tournament must be doing well because the prize pool is going up, or must not be doing so well because the prize pool is going down. I don't have any knowledge as to why it's gone up or gone down, but one thing I do know from working in the esports scene in Singapore for quite some time is most teams I've seen, the organizations try not to take a cut in prize money. And the only contract I've seen ever, in my own eyes, it was something like 1% of prize money they take, and the players themselves said to me, it's just for legal purposes that's there, and they don't even take that from them if they don't have to. So I don't think it dissuades the orgs as much, but it definitely would impact the professional player as well as fans' confidence in the league itself.
All right, so anybody else want to chime in on perhaps some of the challenges? Then we seem to be now moving to a bit more of a kind of nuanced perspective in that we're considering both the positive and perhaps things that need to be improved. So maybe now we can talk about some of that.
Why not let's scope it out this way? Okay, let's scope it out this way. So there seems to be some optimism on one side, saying that there's all this cash coming in, there's all these potential people who are willing to come in there, and there's certain conditions they're met. And yet at the same time, there's certain things that seems to be pointing in the other direction, of which one Rain pointed out, which is what we were saying. He was mentioning the decrease in price pool on the one end. And I think one of the reasons why the price pool is decreased is because running the TLC at a $30,000 price pool budget in terms of the overall budget that they had wasn't very sustainable because of the low viewership and the amount that they were spending on the tournament as a whole. So they wanted to cut down the duration of the thing from what I'm not. This is not an official statement, but this is what I think is the reasoning behind it. So they wanted to cut down the duration of it, make it more sustainable to run, because the TLC, even in 2016, 2017 spring, it was only garnering about 100 to 200 viewers per stream. So there's peanuts. So the stream and the esports products for League of Legends wasn't getting hits, wasn't getting the amount of ROI that it needs. So that's another downward trend as well in terms of audience and viewership that League of Legends is happening. That has been on a downward decline. 2016 it was in 400, 500, and now 2017 the 200 going down to 100.
Yep, I think that has always been the main issue with TLC. We don't have supportive crowds and viewers. Thus all the budget is going towards campus, which generate a lot more hype and a lot more participants and a lot more support. And brands like to associate themselves with campus. I mean, this is where the spending power is, So brands look for what? ROI. Okay, that's the most important thing. So if they can get the spending power of the younger generations in, they are willing to go to the campus side, but they're not seeing the returns for the more so-called professional scene in Singapore. Thus, the lack of sponsorship is also one of the main issues why the prize pool actually got cut. Yeah. So.
I mean, that's, go ahead, Fish. Yeah.
I like what Jackie said about the campus league because one thing that I know plagues Singapore's professional scene in esports is, of course, national service. And the campus scene is a really good scene for that because you have people who have either completed their national service or are about to embark on their national service journey. So you have the best of both worlds. Nobody in that scene has been severed in terms of participating in competitions because they have to enlist into national service. On top of that, Campus League in general already has a very dedicated fan base because you are representing your school. And as soon as that happens, people who are in the same school as you or are passionate or alumni for that school would tune in to watch because they have the fandom for the school itself. Whereas when the TLC started, there weren't many fans or advocates there to promote the league itself because most people... Oh no!
No, it's still okay. You're still okay.
Okay. Because most people who were trying to transition into the TLC originally watched only the GPL back when the Singapore Sentinels were playing, and it was a very awkward transition because that was about the same time as when the Singapore Sentinels started not participating in tournaments. So it was a very awkward transition because you had a diehard audience from Singapore, Malaysia, focusing on their sole attention on one team, which was Singapore Sentinels and the Kuala Lumpur Hunters. And when the local leagues were introduced, you had to kind of split apart these people into 8 to 16 different teams, and they had to dedicate their fandom somewhere else. And most people would still just stick to Singapore Sentinels because they thought they were the strongest, or stick to the Kuala Lumpur Hunters instead. Whereas the Campus League was really set up for success because you already had a dedicated fan base of the schools itself.
That's right.
I think this kind of highlights one of the challenges that we're looking at is how do you manage this transition, and is the campus medium a very good way of saying, okay, we're hedging 2-3 years in the future, and this is where we're going to start building potential stars or potential teams for the future. And for now, we're going to scale back a little bit on doing things in the pro scene because what has been done in the efforts over there isn't really working out very well. And if you look at the question I want to pose over here is that is this too late? Because if we see that the early teams that started very early on in the days of League, like TSM, Fnatic, they're kind of immortalized in terms of branding wise, in terms of following wise. G2 has been the best team in Europe for some time already, almost coming 2 years already. And I would believe that Fnatic has a bigger following than them still.
Definitely.
So now the thing here is that we had the Singapore Sentinels that was working out. We rode that wave for a while, then that kind of crashed. So it was a downward trend. They disbanded, and then we saw the Kuala Lumpur Hunters and the rest of the regions around. So the rest of Southeast Asia, they had this big team that kind of ushered in this transition phase for them, where they can say that, okay, this is the team that we do towards. Like Saigon Jokers was there, and then they were kind of like fired in with Mr. Lee being the head coach and Garena backing the team. And then after they said, okay, the scene is kind of developed enough, there's too much of conflict of interest, we'll let things go. And then suddenly the Gigabyte Marines were there, they took over the helm, and they represented very well in the Southeast Asian scene as a whole. So there was a very successful transition in that phase where we had this godfather figure of Garena coming in and saying that this is what we want to do. Singapore, I think cost was a factor, things were too expensive, they did Singapore Sentinels, didn't work out very well. I'm not sure if Hemi would like to chime in on this issue as well. So that kind of like fizzled out. So are we too late, or is there a way we can compensate for all of this, or do we look back to say this, okay, we need an ushering phase of, mind you, so Gigabyte from Saigon Jokers to Gigabyte Marines, that was 5 years. We're looking at a kind of a phase of 5 years. And now Kuala Lumpur Hunters, they used to have crap management and stuff like that. They finally got some people got rid of some problematic players, and then now they're in the building phase. I think they're hitting some road bumps as well. They're only in year 2 at the moment. And we can already see that there's some signs of growth in the Malaysian scene. I'm not sure how much of it has to do with the Kuala Lumpur Hunters, or is it an overall trend that we're looking at here? Hemi, you got any thoughts? Sorry, Fish.
I'll let Hemi chime in. I only had a couple of things to say about Singapore Sentinels, but I'll let Hemi go first. You have something to say?
No, Fish, you can go ahead first. Let me gather my thoughts.
One thing I wanted to point out, it's a kind of sidetrack from Jensen's point a little bit, but it will give Hammy some time to think about it. Is there's no denying that when the GPL was first introduced, the teams that were in the GPL were marketed very well by Garena. I mean, if you give case to the Singapore Sentinels, they did a fantastic job of not only turning people who didn't know what the GPL was into people who watched the GPL, but at the same time, they were able to turn these people into fans of their respective regions and their respective teams. They humanized all their players. They started an entire YouTube series called In the League, which showcased the daily lives of the players, and eventually sparked off to become its own YouTube channel later on. And they really set those teams and players up for success. They turned people who just watched the GPL into fans of their teams, into fans of these players, and they later became advocates for the league. They later then told their friends, "Hey, come watch this. This is really cool. There's this really cool match going on later on. Come watch it with me." And they turned their friends into fans, and the cycle kept repeating. There were a couple of regions that handed off the baton really well. I mean, the LMS comes to mind. You now have a really big following there, multiple teams that have been set up for success, big orgs that have taken over. Even when you go into places like in Vietnam, where the Gigabyte Marines are so strong, they now have a massive international following, and there's still a lot of local teams that have a massive following as well. So they were passed off very well. Singapore also had the problem of the fact that the population is a lot lower in comparison to so many other regions. You can only have a certain amount of people watching at any given time because, unfortunately, there's just not as many people in the country. But there was a very poor transition phase. And if I'm not mistaken, Singapore Sentinels, which was when the GPL was incepted, was top 3. It was pretty much TPA, then you had SAJ and SGS. For a while, I know Hammy's shaking his head, for a while SGS was number 2. They were something like 33% against TPA, would never lose to anyone else, maybe occasionally against SAJ. But when TLC was introduced, they were dropped down to about top 3, maybe top 4 when TPS were introduced into the league. And if I'm not wrong, SGS was one of the first original Garena teams that stepped out of esports. They were the first team that was like, okay, we're done, we've disbanded. And they're one of the few teams that couldn't even qualify for their local scene at one point. And that is a very awkward transition when you put the hearts of every single fan in one country into one team invested, and you don't have that team around to hand the baton on to the rest of the teams in the region when you diversify. That is a really difficult situation for a league, and I think that was one of the main reasons why the TLC did struggle so much initially.
Would Hemi like to comment about the whole kind of the rise and fall of Singapore Sentinels and how that compares to the rest of the region?
Don't do it! It's too painful! I don't want to cry!
Sorry, I have something to add, but I'll go after Tammy. Okay?
No, if you have something to add, go ahead.
No. This SGS is you're the man. I'm not gonna take a spotlight.
No.
Go ahead and talk about SGS. I mean, my point is a bit more what we can do now, but
I think talking about the past is pointless.
It's
good to talk about the past. Why? Because you wanna look at
you wanna learn.
Want to look at mistakes that were made. You want to know what went wrong. Then you can fix it probably.
Don't start a team in Singapore.
I mean, both sides, right? Hammy, you can learn what were the good things that happened with FGS, what were the bad things as well.
Is that all you came up with, Hammy, after all that time and processing? You came up with don't start a team in Singapore?
I mean, it's really not worth it for any of the sponsors or partners for them to come into a local scene that's really just a very small fish in a very big pond. Even within Southeast Asia, we are a very small market. So, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I guess we never got, I mean, in terms of sponsorship money, we don't get a huge amount. Although our standard of living is so high, which is why, probably one of the reasons why SGS was the first team to, first Garena team to bow out of the GPL. It's really the cost of running the team here. And each of my players could have probably paid for an entire team in Vietnam or Philippines. So that's one of the challenges that we have.
High costs, low viewership.
Yeah, high cost, low viewership. Yeah, so there's no ROI, like Jackie said just now. There's no return of investment for any of the sponsors. Yeah, so a lot of people, even recently, are starting teams in Vietnam or Indonesia, even where the costs are much lower, and you get a lot more viewership and you get a lot more, even social media coverage. Just for bang for buck, you get more bang for buck. So it's tough.
I can add something to that. Well, sorry, but this is what I feel. Singapore may not have the biggest population, but we have a very high spending power. It's about how we tap onto that market. And this is a very difficult audience, I feel, primarily because we don't support local, man. We don't like it when... You look at the reason why S-League sports, soccer, is not as popular. It's because we don't like it when Singaporeans play against Singaporeans. But when we play in the region, I think that there is good support here. Good nationalism, somewhat, to bang on.
Only if you win.
Yeah, and that is another issue. But, well, the key thing here is I feel that SGS made its mark. And I feel that it's a very noble attempt by Garena to try and sustain it. But the cost is definitely a big problem. And if you're looking to sponsors to really come in, the ROI is not big because the problem here isn't the organization. The problem here isn't even the players. It's not even about a prize pool. The problem here is with the marketing of the league. How do you get people to want to watch what's going on? Yes, we don't have the best players here because we have small population, 5 million, and that plus the fact that most of our players cannot commit. Why? Because you are only semi-pro, I think, at best in League of Legends or in any esports in Singapore. You have studies. Nothing can beat the prospect of a 3K pay right out of your graduation. But the truth is a lot of people go into depths, but we'll talk about that. That's another topic. Yeah. The key thing here that we have on hand is the fact that how do you get people to be vested in a league? I think Fish made a very good point about the campus league and the fact that, there's a bit of like playing for my school kind of an angle, and that angle is very nice. But that will not transition to the Pro League because there's a period that we call national service that's going to happen after that. And I think it's also a big problem for SGS because players had to go national service halfway through their competitive career, and that kind of stifled fans a little bit. If I really like watching, say, maybe Tofu Boy, and he's playing, then all of a sudden he goes into national service, my favorite player is gone, it's just bad. Yeah. So this is inherently a very Singaporean problem, and the only way to go around it is if we can get governmental support, but our government's kind of slow to pick things up, but they are supportive. They just need the right push in the right direction, which they will eventually come to. I think that I won't say that only Skoga is doing that. I would say that a lot of people are pushing the government in this direction, and we just need a bit of a pushover. Then we'll be there. But the bigger question that I think that needs to be addressed right now is, I'm perfectly fine with a downsize in prize pool. I think that prize pool downsize don't really affect me. It affects how the league looks. It affects the players because they're the ones getting the majority of the money. But what I'm more interested to know is that Garena should be thinking of how they can better market the league. That I think I'm fine. If you scale down your prize pool by 20,000, you want to ask yourself the next logical question is, where does that 20,000 go to? Does it go to more tournaments, which I don't think makes sense? I think it should go towards marketing the stars in your so-called league. And whether it is from whichever organization, doesn't matter. If there's a rivalry here, you need to put it out there. You need to get people interested. And this is also something that the organization needs to do. And that is the fact that we need to be investing a lot more money, I think, in the marketing of our players. I think we need to really formulate plans around how we can get people to like them. This is something that both the organizers and the organization can work towards. But at the moment, there is no such conversation happening. And that's something that I look forward to, at least in the league scene, because they had previous success with SGS. They definitely have knowledge on how to do it. They just need to find the right people. Also, another issue is the moment SGS went down, there was this organization called ISG that's picking out every team in Singapore. and that kind of made it quite hard to market. It's not nothing wrong with ISG. It's just that that's a curveball thrown in Garena's way, and it probably made it quite hard for them to really think out how they can push that a little bit more. So that's just what I think. What needs to be done here is better marketing. Better, how do you get people who play your game? We're not even talking about like people who don't play League, right? We're talking about people who play League of Legends, for example. If you want to get people who play, maybe say Dota 2 to watch League of Legends, they probably won't care. But if you want to get people who play League of Legends to watch League of Legends, that shouldn't be so hard. There should be something there, and the magic is something that I think Garena or Riot has the answer. They just need to. They even have the platform, so they just need to want to do it.
So can I just chime in here a little bit? So there actually was this period of time because in 2016 when I was running VTL as well as NYZ together with Nelson, and I was kind of like straddling all boats. I was being a caster, I was coaching, I was managing the teams, looking for sponsors, and I was interning at Garena as well at the same time. And in terms of marketing the league and these kind of things, you can say that yes, the onus is on the teams, the onus is on the organization to market the team better. But then this is where we kind of need to look at the numbers and say, okay, what is the numbers we need to be hitting to really kind of achieve this kind of sustainability to justify putting about X amount of dollars into something else. And I think this is we're looking at a much larger problem in Singapore in general, which brings us back to what Hemi said. It's in things in Singapore, cost of living is just very high. We have very high spending power, but also the cost of getting space, the cost of renting out space, the cost of hiring people, the cost of just doing anything in Singapore in general is just absurdly expensive as compared to everything else in the region. And the viewership is just very low in general, so your cost of acquiring a single viewer is comparatively high as compared to everywhere else in the region. And this is complicated further by the problem that a lot of companies in the region, they market, if not by Southeast Asia, they have marketing headquarters that allocates a budget to Singapore and Malaysia. So we are competing with the Malaysians who get $3 to our $1 over here in terms of costs, and for 10 times the potential viewership because they have just 10 times the population over there as well.
Just chiming on that a little bit, Jensen and I have had way too many discussions on the comparisons on esports to the S League because we both are very familiar in both aspects of those two leagues. But it's not just a problem in esports in Singapore. It's a sports problem in general.
Yeah.
A lot of people play football in Singapore. A lot of people play basketball as well. But if I was to ask, I would say 99 times out of 100, if I walked up to somebody in the middle of Orchard Road or anywhere in Singapore and said, "What's your favorite sports team?" I think only 1 out of 100 people will actually give me a local team. Or I'm actually.
I think it's lesser than that.
I would actually up the stakes and say that most of those people wouldn't be able to name me 2 or 3 local teams. Like they'll know the Young Lions.
We should do it.
And
knows Wellington.
maybe that's it. That's Wellington. But yeah, it's been a problem that's affected sports in Singapore for a long time, and the two leagues that I used to follow, both the S League as well as the National Basketball League, they both did have very strong attendance. I don't know what the numbers were because it's all broadcasted on mainstream media, so unlike Twitch or YouTube, I can't actually check the stats myself. But when I was in attendance...
10 to 15,000 on television.
When I was attending the actual games itself, there used to be a large crowd, not just for the S League, which was very popular when maybe say 2000s, 2005-ish, that era, but also the Basketball League, which was very popular when the Singaporean Basketball League merged with the Australian Basketball League. There was a very strong following from Singaporean fans. But again, these two leagues slowly died out, and if you go to a local SG soccer game now, you will see maybe at best 50% of the seats taken up by people. You might get a few really good games if you go to somewhere like Home United. Ballister used to have a very diehard audience as well, and if you go to their games in a very big match, yes, you'd see quite a few fans there. But in comparison to the population that watches international sports, or in this case, international leagues like the LCS or the EU LCS, it's a very drastic difference. A lot of people here would be watching international competition a lot more.
Right, and I think just to...
And
sorry. Who was that? Who's?
And sorry, just
Yeah.
my that's me, Mr. Robot.
Can
and
I
my
just
last point
ask
to that
this
is
question over here?
yeah, go
So
for it.
when you guys were in the OPL, right? I guess you guys had a similar problem. You guys were English product, and you guys are competing with the international English products that have kind of a domination in the global market. So, what did you guys do in OPL to try to compensate for that?
I mean, I don't know too much about it because I wasn't involved very heavily in the planning, but I do know, based from what I know about casting the OPL, is that one thing that Riot did with the OPL is they tried to push towards making this league very competitive. And the same way Garena did it for the GPL during its inception, they were the ones fronting a lot of it, trying to get orgs invested, trying to make sure people knew that this was something that's growing, make sure people knew that the esports scene in Oceania is growing as well. And they did a really good job of making sure that every decision they made, the first question that they normally ask themselves is this something that we want to do for our players? Not something... how do I explain this? This is something that they want to do for the Oceanic audience. Is this something that the Oceanic audience would appreciate that we're doing for them? And not so much would a player appreciate this. They want to make sure that the Oceanic player feels like this is something that is being done for them and catered for them. And they did a really good job of marketing the players and the teams to the point where people became fans as well as advocates of those teams and made sure that cycle continued, which is a really good point because in Singapore, when I was in school, that's how I started watching international football. Because I only ever watched the S League because my dad used to be a player in the S League. And then he became a coach in the S League. So I was his fan. I was his advocate. I used to go and watch his games. I never watched the BPL. I never watched La Liga. I never watched the Champions League. The only time I started watching was when a friend of mine started talking about how he's such a big fan of Newcastle United. And I was like, oh, this guy really likes this club. I should go check out what this league is about. And I started watching the BPL. I didn't watch it too long because watching football wasn't something I really enjoyed unless it was the World Cup because I have national pride for my country. But I could understand why these people were being transformed into fans of these teams and fans of these players because all their friends were going up to them saying, hey, come watch this with me. You know, this is an awesome league. This is a great player. He's so good. Let's go watch it. And nobody did that for the S League. Nobody did that for basketball. And it was, I can say, during the inception of GPL and the TLC, there were a lot of people that were doing that to me for the TLC and the GPL, but slowly that died out as well. Slowly it became, hey, let's watch the Gigabyte Marines. Oh, look, a GPL team made it into MSI. Let's go watch them. Let's support them. So that level of turning fans into advocates, turning people into fans of teams and players just kind of died out in Singapore in general. And it's going to take a lot of effort to try and spark that up, but I believe it can still be done. Just very difficult task at that.
Okay, well, I want to come in here and Rain, I actually want to get your thoughts on this because maybe you can share what are some of the conversations that you and your peers have, say, with your friends or even your family, because I think Fish, you brought up a great point about how do we make people into viewers, and how much more so fans. But sometimes there's this view on gaming, right, where your parents would be like, oh, don't play so much, or even your friends would be like, how many hours a day do you spend playing, and they don't get it when you say like practice, or they don't get it like, wait, how big is this thing exactly? I mean, maybe now esports is gaining a bit of ground, but I just want to hear your perspective again from a player and a coach. What are some of the conversations that you have with your friends and family on esports? How do those go?
I'll let Rain take this first, but I've got a good point after that on the same topic.
Okay, so actually I don't have much to add because I don't think I really experienced a lot of difficulty trying to convince my family and my friends to accept esports as something that is mainstream. So it's not something that I had a lot of difficulty with. So I don't think I'm in the best position to share any experiences about that. But I've met a few people and players that have had such difficulties with accepting esports as a mainstream sport, and most of the time it just takes a bit more time and effort for them to convince their families to accept it as part of their lives. So it's a matter of time, in my opinion.
Right, and you mentioned effort in there as well. I mean, I don't want to, maybe this is a pretty big conversation, but how about results? Would you say results matter? Because a lot of times what we've seen is, from a lot of famous players, they're like, oh yeah, it was really tough to convince like my family but then I won this tournament, or I showed them my first check, and then so how much of, say, results do you think factors into that acceptance beyond just a time factor or a persistence factor?
I think for some of them, I would say I speak for most students that are trying to be in the competitive scene, that most of their parents are actually concerned about whether there is career progression coming up from their esports, their current times investing into esports. And it's very sad to say that most of the old players have not managed to carve out a career of sorts in esports. Except, I mean, there are a couple like me and maybe shoutcasting and things like that. But for players, I think the only one player that has managed to do it for us is Chowi, right? And it's a classic example of the one shining star, the one shining example that he has managed to carve out a very sustainable career for himself, and managed to also get acceptance from his family and friends in that aspect. So it's not easy to do it, in my opinion.
Right.
I mean,
exception. Yeah, go ahead, Fish.
we have a few. There's a few really well-known
Yeah.
that have done well in esports. I mean, Ice comes to mind. HY was very popular at a point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah. You even have there's a couple of really good Street Fighter players.
Xian.
Yes,
Ah,
Xian,
yeah,
that's
and
it. Why am I thinking
We
of
had
somebody else? But-
internal representation at Hearthstone, but I think I mean for those, their careers is still exceptions. I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
they are definitely.
this is the same thing I tell every single parent I meet and every person that comes up to me and says, I want to be a professional gamer. I tell them the exact same thing, which is, how much time do you put into playing the game? It varies. It could be like 2 hours a day, 8 hours a day, which is a lot, and it really varies from person to person. The big thing I ask them after that is, okay, cool. I don't really care about how much time you put into the game. I want to know how much time you're putting into everything else in your life. And if you were to take every single hour you were putting into esports and put it into a different hobby, would that be too much? I don't care if it's spread out across multiple hobbies, but if you're playing soccer and basketball 2 hours a day for a total of 4 hours, and then stamp collecting another 4 hours or something like that.
Yeah,
But if I was to change every and remove gaming from your life and change it into a different hobby, and do you think you'd still have a problem there? And 60% of the time, most people will tell me, actually, yeah, if I was playing 8 hours of football a day, I'd probably die. I'd probably die from physical exertion. And that's where I tell them, well, that's where you need to slowly cut out a little bit and focus on other aspects of your life, because education is still very important, even if you're trying to become a professional footballer. You still need to educate yourself, learn, because learning is probably the most important thing to do. And at the same time, if you think, I play 4 hours a day. I spend 4 hours with friends and family. I go to school for 8 hours, get 8 hours of rest, which I know most students would never get 8 hours of rest. But if they can see that they're balancing this well in their life, then I say, okay, go for it. The next step is, I want to ask you, how many people do you think play soccer in the world? And they say, millions. Everyone as a kid, plays some form of sport. And I say, how many of those people are actually professional players? And I don't just mean like BPL superstars or go to the World Cup superstars. I mean, can make a living off playing. And most of the time, you don't really know the answer. And I'll put it to them this way. There's about 10 teams in the S League. I haven't followed the scene in years now, so I'm not too sure. Most teams will have about 20 players. So you have 200 people. Then you add staff, coaches, probably 400 people that work in the broadcast industry, and so on and so forth. So you maybe have 1,000 people out of the 5 million that live in this country that do this as a professional thing. It is very difficult to do it professionally. So it's always good to have as a hobby, and if you can you can take the next step forward, do it. It's a really good, really great thing to do. It's a fun, enjoyable experience. And if you can make a career out of it, that's fantastic. But you always have to remember that this is a professional sport. You become an athlete. Your career depends on your performance. It depends on how well you do it. It depends on how much you practice, how much time you put into it. And that all scales. The more time you put into that, the less part you have for other aspects of your life. The less part you have to develop yourself, and you have to realize you are going to set yourself back if you end up deciding not to continue with this career. If you decide that halfway through,
RoboFish is back.
you have to understand that time you become a valuable skills in doing so.
Yeah, but I think we caught about 90, 95%
Okay,
of
RoboFish
that. Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
No, 90, like 99%
Yeah,
of that
but
got through. Good stuff.
Basically, you have to remember that there will be a point in time where either you make it or you break it. You have to accept that whatever I put into it, I'm happy with it. I balance my life well enough that I can still get back on track and continue to contribute to society.
Right. So I think that's a great point, Fish, because that's one thing that we often fail to see. I think a lot of times is that balance. Again, now we're really looking at it in a life perspective beyond kind of just say games, right? But my question is for again, those of you that have experience, say, in organizations, do you think that that's something that organizations can provide? I mean, one thing that we really saw come to esports that was a big benefit to players was coaching, management, and qualified coaches and managers that would be the ones to help make this transition possible, to ask some of these questions and to have good plans in place to help young people who may not always have these questions and actions at the forefront of their mind actually structure some of this into their life. So maybe those of you that are running or a part of organizations now can comment on that, and the role of managing players. How important is an organization for that? And do you think an organization has a large responsibility to ensure a player's growth and management of some of these big life questions?
Is that question directed at me?
Sure,
Looks
go
like-
for it. Go for
Yeah.
it.
If you want.
Okay, this is what I think. I think that this is I'm gonna quote Chinese saying here, 一将功成万骨枯. What it means is that one person's success is built upon the thousands of those that failed. And this is how it works in sports, because you have to be talented, you have to be putting in effort, and you have to be willing to sacrifice. And if you quote the examples of the top 3 Singaporean players, Choi, Ice, Xian, all 3 went through national service. All 3 were able to put a lot of time and effort into their progress. But we often forget the number of people who did the same thing and failed. So, realistically speaking, there comes a point in time where a player needs to decide for himself, how much does he want this? Is he really good enough to get it? Is he willing to sacrifice something for it? Say, for example, we talk about maybe taking a gap year in studies. We talk about all this kind of stuff. And I guess this is something that a lot of Singaporean parents are having trouble with, because we are not, I mean, we're Asians, right? So we basically are competing in a rat race. You rush to complete your studies, you rush to get a degree, you rush to get your first job, you rush to get a good pay, you rush to get married, you rush to have a kid, then you rush to die. So basically, this is the rat race,
Yeah.
right? This is the rat race that we're in. A lot of people have difficulty comprehending that some things in life, the fact that you tried your best for it is worth it. So this is something that the player needs to decide himself. Then comes the next step, is convincing the parent, convincing the peers, because we want to be responsible people, right? And then the organization can then come in and say, all right, what can I do for you? If you think about it, the organization can probably stabilize a player's pay for 1 year, make it worth its while. But what a player really wants is not that kind of pay. The player wants something along the lines of, I want to be famous. I want to be world star player. I want to play on a world stage. I want to go to worlds. I want to be recognized. In terms of marketing, I think that the organization can do this, but the organization alone cannot tank it. You really need the help of the organizer of the league. You really need the help of the people in the scene, and it all starts really small. How many players in the how many players in the scene actually tell their friends they're competing that weekend and say, hey, come on down, support me, watch me? Yeah, I know you don't play the game, but I'm playing, and if you're a really good friend, why don't you be there for me? It's just a simple gesture, but no one does it, because the number of people that turned up at SLS, I think it's proved to everyone that, if everyone brought their girlfriend, you would have at least double the amount of people there. But the key thing that I'm trying to put across here is that this has to be resolved from multiple angles. For a player to say that I want it, you must then ask yourself, how likely are you to succeed? Which is fish point, right? And then you gotta ask yourself, is it worth it? Again, fish point. And then the last question is, can I convince people I want this? Is it worth it? You cannot take a gap year and regret. It's your life. You only have X amount of years to live, right? You're spending your own time. You're spending precious time to the Asian parent that this is something you want to do. So I think that most players need to recognize that this is a sacrifice for them to succeed. But they also need to recognize, more importantly, that on top of it being a sacrifice, it more often than not is a sacrifice for not. Because there's a very high chance you may not succeed, right? League being a team game also makes it a little bit more difficult because you need 5 people on the same page. And you're willing to sacrifice doesn't mean the other 4 jokers will do the same thing. You can play the game maybe in Korea server, wherever, and maybe up your game a lot, but it's a team game. If you don't train up enough, it's just going to fall flat. So this makes it exceptionally hard.
I mean, just to touch on that quickly as well, which is one big thing I always get from people that come up to me, to me being a YouTuber or being a caster, is they always tell me, hey, I really want to do what you do. I really want to, I want to be a shoutcaster. I want to act on a YouTube channel. I want to start my own YouTube channel. Or in this case, for the purpose of this topic, people that want to become professional gamers. Another question I like to ask them is why? And you'd be surprised by how many people come up and say, oh, I want to be famous and rich, and I want everyone to know who I am. And the first thing I tell them is, please, no, go and if you want to do it because you want to be rich and you want to be famous, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You want to do this because this is your passion. This is what you enjoy doing, and only then will you truly be able to set yourself up for success.
Yeah,
I actually am going to disagree with you on that one, Fish, because this I think comes from a very privileged position where, I don't usually like to phrase things that way, but usually where we have a lot of options. So this kind of is something that we can always say when we have a lot of good options to choose from. But sometimes some of these kids and a lot of these people who have already spent too much time playing this game and aren't really doing very well in life in general. Let's say they're maybe in ITE or they've dropped out of Polytechnic, and they're in these kind of situations. And then, okay, what else do they have in life? Are they going to be waiting tables? And in terms of career progression, they don't really have a lot of good options as well. So there's this game called League of Legends, and they're pretty good at. So let's say, So there's this game called League of Legends that they're pretty good at, and they say that, okay, I want to go pro at this. And they want to do it because it can earn them money. It's the only thing that they can look at and say that, yeah, this is my one shot of breaking out of, say, the current rut I'm in, or breaking out of the current, maybe, say, family scenario that isn't very well to do financially to begin with. And they look at it, they look at the fame, they look at the glory and say, yes, I want to be famous, I want to be rich. And I feel that I'm really good at this game, and this is my best chance at doing it. Because not everybody will have a university degree, and not everybody will have the capital to go out and be the next Facebook.
Okay, can I bring up something?
Sure.
Just real quick.
Sure.
Story time. So I like to share a story about how I got Jason Hallelujah into League of Legends. Basically, back then when I was forming SGS, I spotted him playing League at some of the smaller tournaments. I think back then he was in Nice Young Men, NYM.
I hated his team. He always hated my team. Didn't like it.
So, from there I could tell he had potential. He was really young. He was still, he was doing his N levels, but he was skipping school to play League and all that. So, when I scouted him, I told him, just quit school. Don't waste your time. Give me 1 year of your life. Give me 1 year to prove that SGS is going to be a success, and then if it doesn't work out, I will send you back to school myself. It's the same talk that I told his father. I met his dad. I explained to him that this is a real thing, and we are trying to make esports grow in Singapore. So I spoke to his father and convinced them that dropping out of school was the right thing to do because he was going to fail anyway. So I didn't want him to waste his time, and just quit school. And, give yourself a chance, give me a chance, and give SGS a chance and see how far we can go. So it is what it is today. And then for Chowi's story, when we formed SGS, he had just enlisted and he couldn't join. He only joined halfway through when his schedule was, his army had settled in, and he knew that he was doing a fixed time, and he would be able to stay out at night. So he would come in the evenings to train with the team. Back then, we couldn't give him a salary because he's in NS and he couldn't moonlight. So the team got together. It was a team decision. The team got together to give him part of their own salaries as as contribution. Not a lot of people know this. So as part of his contributions and for him putting in so much effort, after NS he would immediately come down to office and train with the team. So the team decided to pull together, to give him parts of their own salaries, and everyone agreed. It wasn't forced upon them. So I think that was a very encouraging thing. And Chowi really wanted to succeed. He put in a lot of time. If you read his story, he barely slept 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, and he was training most of the time on his own individual skill, even taking the last train home and then continuing to play when he got home. Whereas for Ice it's a completely different thing. He never trained hard. He never played anything seriously. He's never done anything seriously. But he is just that talented. During NS, he didn't even play Dota. He was playing StarCraft because it was a single player game and he didn't need to train with a team. So during his time in NS, he was strategizing and come up with his own strategies to play in 1v1 StarCraft tournaments. And he became the StarCraft champion. So even before Dota, he was Singapore's Warcraft 3 champion. And then he played Dota because there was more money in it. And then he went to StarCraft because during NS, he couldn't play as a team. And then after NS, now he's back in Dota. So, he's just that talented. That's really... I wouldn't say he doesn't work hard, but he's really just that good. And I don't think we will see anyone like him again.
So let me summarize. Sorry. Please carry on.
This really quick point. Isn't there a legend of Ice taking part in a small competition in Singapore, and he had no idea what he was doing, so someone taught him how to play Oriana on the day itself. He managed to win.
Pantheon.
That was the season 1. He was
story?
asking.
Okay, let's just kind of wrap this up and let's try to move on to problem solving. Let's move on to problem solving. So can we just have a small litmus test of sorts over here? Okay, so now we talked a lot about esports and the rise, the career of pro players and the rise and stuff like that. Right now, you have a friend who comes up to you and says, "I'm 1,000 points on the Singaporean or whichever. Okay, I'm 1,000 points on fair enough, Singapore on the Singaporean League of Legends ladder." And this person is thinking of going pro at League of Legends. What do you tell him? Just sum it up in one sentence.
Can I start first?
Sure.
I'll say something along the lines of, well, basically, how much do you want to give to try? Set yourself a time limit. Set yourself a safety net in this event that it doesn't work out. In the event that you realize it's not worth it, or you have had enough and you feel like you've done enough, you've tried your best, but you couldn't go further, and then pursue other options in life. Yeah.
Jackie?
Don't.
No, that's exactly what I told Hallelujah. Give me 1 year and then I'll send you back to school myself. But SGS did do well in the first year, so we continue with that.
Wait, Jackie, were you done elaborating? I feel like as somebody in the industry, I want to know why you say don't.
You see, You see the example of Southeast Asia, right? Why are there more successful people out there? It's more towards they are willing to sacrifice everything, and I mean everything, to go into esports and train and be committed to it. But in Singapore, probably now at this current moment, there's no one that's willing to sacrifice everything to go into into an industry that is growing. So
Yeah.
so in Singapore, I would say don't.
Right. So you're the context of why you say don't is you just think that nobody would be willing to give up that much.
It's the op cost. The op cost is too high.
And because we're specifically talking about the Singaporean context, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
I have quite a similar point to the point that Babel mentioned, which is I would say be smart about it. If you are going to do it, don't put everything you have into it. Put what you can into it, and use your time smartly. Don't be a hard worker. Be someone who works smart about it. You know, find coaching. Make sure you're doing the right thing. Make sure you're learning the right thing. And at the same time, always work on yourself, not just this game. Make sure you're always focusing on improving yourself as well as the game itself. That way, you know, it's not necessarily a safety net, but you know, if one day, you know, you've tried your hardest for as long as you can and you decided, okay, now's the time for me to step back and realistically approach, let's say I don't succeed in becoming a pro player, step back, realistic, take a look at what my opportunities are. If you've been working on yourself, you still have a way out, so to speak. But I do agree with Jackie in the sense that it's very rare nowadays that you see the people like Chowie who go, I'm going all in, I'm putting 110% in this to get the best result possible, because a lot of people are scared. So it's that catch-22 situation. They keep the safety net because they're scared it won't work, and because of that they don't go all in, so to speak.
Yep, that's right.
So my answer to this actually is there's a precursor to it. The first question asked is actually, have you finished NS? And they need to have finished NS first, because my answer to this question actually changed in this year. And I did this entire one year gap year thing with Alex Tan, Shinsekai, one of the top laners in the Singaporean scene. And I brought him to Taiwan for Fireball, which was the team I was coaching in the LMS. And what I realized was that it takes a 1 year transition period to start off as an amateur and make the transition to become a pro player. A lot of organizations nowadays is because they've gone through this entire transition phase already. So last time you could be an amateur and a pro player at the same time, players like Ice and back in season 2 and that kind of things. But now in season 6, season 7, you need to start off as a training partner on a team for half a year to 1 year, for that kind of duration. So I brought Alex Tan over to Taiwan, and then he would probably be the 7th or 8th best top laner in the LMS if he did actually get to start. But he wouldn't get a starting position over my current top laner. So they offered him a position on the training team, the ECS team, the 2nd division in Taiwan. And what would happen is that he will only be able to play for them in the summer split, which would mean that if he does qualify for LMS, he will not be able to play because of the 1 year time limit that was set for him, and actually kind of enforced by the fact that there was national service. So in this case, the transition takes too long. If you haven't finished NS, don't do it. Sorry, I kind of cheated. I did it like an entire paragraph.
You said one line, Jensen.
I cheated.
NS makes things so difficult for professional
It's true.
Gamers.
Sorry,
I mean, even football
I
players.
just want to put real quick, because I think NS is something that will probably take like a whole session of chatting.
Yeah,
But,
it's
so
long,
I think
but
let's
it's-
not get into that tonight. But I think definitely it's a very fair point. Again, we're talking about the Singaporean context. I mean, just briefly looking through some of the YouTube comments, which was very lively. So thank you for those of you that were following us on YouTube. And this was actually one of the things. And so some of these structural concerns. I think, Jensen, it's a really good question you ask about what you would tell somebody, just directly. And I think a lot of the good points here, I'm just trying to pull a lot of the strings together, seem to be this question of, holistic development and balance in pursuing a professional esports career. My question then, which, we'll see how far we can get into it because I think it's a pretty big one, is that necessarily something that runs counter to marketing? Because that's something we talked about previously, right? Where marketing is supposed to be this glamorous and supposed to be like, oh, esports is the best thing ever. So how then do you have these conversations? Should the esports organization be expected to have these conversations? So how do you get the word out there that this is something you're supposed to take very maturely, very wisely, with a lot of balanced thinking, when kind of the marketing aspect of that just flies contrary to that? Well, I mean, what do you guys think? Do you see that as a contradiction or as some kind of tension?
I don't think there's too much contradiction, because the same thing's done in regular sports. Similar marketing is done to showcase what these professional athletes do and how good they are at a high level. I think this really comes down to the mentors of these players and their coaches, because in professional sport, that's where the sports team ideology comes about, where everyone is each other's best friend as long as you are performing. And as soon as you're not performing, unfortunately, you're cut. That's why it's the sports team mentality and not the family mentality, where family, you're family no matter what, thick and thin, but not the same for sports teams. And it's really important for coaches, and in this case I'm going to say mentors, because there's a scenario where there aren't going to be coaches in an amateur scene, but your mentors, to make sure people understand this, that if you don't perform and if you are not good enough, you will get cut, and it's an actual possibility no matter how good you are. There is a chance that one day Faker might not be good enough to play in Professional League of Legends, and he would get cut, because that's how sports teams work.
Right, so just to move this along, Trish, in the Singaporean context, we have been rather slow to pick up coaching, and maybe Rain, you can chime in here. I mean, so I like what you said about mentoring. My question is, where do these people come from? Do we expect them to come from our peers? Somebody that's just the leader that steps up and says, okay, I'll do it. I'll be the one to look at things a bit more nuanced, a bit more maturely. Because I kind of feel like that's the scenario. Just somebody in the team just says, okay, guys, we really have to take a step back and look at the big picture. Or do we need to bring in a professional coach? What do you guys think? Basically, my question is, where are we going to find these mentors? And at what point in time do they come in?
Maybe I'd like just to chime in a bit on the mentorship part. I think a coach should definitely have some form of, or majority of the coaches should have leadership as their primary quality. So they need to be able to make sure that they are going to take responsibility of the things that are happening in the team. And this is actually how I managed to start off with coaching as well, because a little bit about my history in the past, because I did actually initially form an amateur team before, which is known as Reigning Jelly Bears, or RJB for short. Not so sure if you guys still remember, but for me to actually start that team in the first place takes a lot of courage to do it, to step forward and say that, hey, I'm going to be the captain of this team, I'm going to take control and leadership of this and of this team, and I'm going to be able to bring this team forward. So it's to find individuals like this. I haven't met a lot of them in the scene recently, I guess, but there are a couple that have expressed interest to do it. But I feel like it's a quality that's very rare in the scene nowadays. For coaches and mentors to appear, and that's why I think besides me right now and Jensen, I think there's only Leonard. Nelson. Oh yeah, Nelson, but he's currently overseas with HKA, if I'm not wrong, right? So there's only 4, I think, in this scene right now with Leonard or Omo. So it's not a lot of good coaching talent coming out in the first place. So.
And really quickly, Rain, how did people respond when you stepped up? Because these were your peers, right? How did they react to that idea? Were they like, oh, finally somebody's here to lead us, or were they like, we don't need a coach? What was the response like?
I think the first thing that people actually, or players actually look at when they are determining whether they should respect a coach or follow a coach is the credibility. So the credibility of a coach. So I was obviously very inexperienced at that point of time. I didn't know anything at all, and even today, I don't have a lot of credibility in my portfolio as a coach, because it's so hard to build up this experience in the local scene. There's only one competition that you are going to be competing in, and that is the TLC or the SLS. And the only way that you're going to be able to get external credibility is if you go to overseas leagues like Jensen and Nelson when they went to Taiwan, for example. So it's very hard to build up this credibility and this portfolio as a coach, and that's why there's a lot of inertia with players responding to coaches. So it was a very tough period of time initially, especially when I was trying to enforce some form of discipline within the team. I think discipline is also something that's very important within a team, especially when an amateur team is trying to transition to a professional team. So just to sidetrack a bit about discipline, because I think that discipline is one of the most important tools in coaching for an amateur team. So recently I'm not so sure if you guys knew about it, but recently I went to Sea Serpent's gaming house to actually have a mini boot camp, a 3 to 4 day boot camp with the 2 Thailand players there, which is Rock and Intresso. So we had a mini boot camp down there, and I really started to understand what discipline was within the team culture, the team environment, because discipline is not just a short-term kind of goal. It's making sure that in the long run you are practicing what you preach or what you want to get. So we really managed to enforce a lot of discipline during the 3 or 4 day boot camp, because everyone was on the same page in terms of achieving the same purpose, because everybody just wanted to improve, and consistently we were having I think about 7 to 8 hours of solo queue practice in a day, and then after that about 1 or 2 sprint blocks in the evening, and it was just consistent non-stop training for the 3 to 4 days.
Okay, can I just chip in over here? Sorry to cut you off there, but just to sum up your point, I experienced a lot of what you experienced as well, and I think this kind of brings into what Fish was saying, or who was it who asked, where do these coaches come from? Where do these mentors come from? Or was it you, Mark? Yeah, sorry, that was you, Mark. So where do all these people come from? And I think that it's a poison chalice that you drink from, especially in an amateur scene, because you're effectively a player-elected coach. At any point of time, if the players don't want to listen to you, you're gone. You've got no power, you've got no authority. You are second to them, because there's no organization or there is no secondary factor to help a coach have authority over people. So I think we had this as well in resonance as well when I was coaching you as a player, where there's a lot of these things going on, and there's only that much limited control that you have as a coach. Ultimately, what the players say counts for things. But I was lucky to have you as the captain at the point of time, so at least there was a means of communication with the rest of the team. But for player-elected coaches, it's such a difficult thing, because now at this point of time, what is a coach to a lot of these people? A coach is somebody who come in there, handle administrative work for them, and then make the game easier for them by handling the difficult part of drafting. And then if things don't go well, blame the draft, blame the coach. So nobody really wants to step up to the responsibility of being coaching, because when you do coaching, you are responsible for the results. Because everybody looks to you as the leader. It's like the same way when you watch a football team, and if the team doesn't do well, do the players get sacked? The players don't get sacked. When the team doesn't do well, who do the players call for? Whose hate do the players call? Whose hate do the fans call for? They call for the manager's hate. It's the same thing here with the coach. So you're just a guy on the chopping block. A team doesn't do well, fire the coach, get a new guy. He's not good. Especially in this case, when you're just player elected. So especially if you have disagreements with the player as well, the players feel that things should be done in a certain way, change the coach. Okay, now everything's fine, everything's dandy once again. And I think this is where it's very important for organizations to come in and really give coaches their seats and their position of coaching. When I used to coach in the Singaporean scene, I didn't call it coaching. I just called myself an advisor to the team, because without this seat of authority, you were never actually a coach. You were just an advisor, you were just a friend of the team, going there, telling them things, and at the end of the day, you don't have power over them. It's like what you said, disciplining them. The team doesn't want to play, they want to screw around, they want to throw band, they want to throw big in game. You can't effectively stop them. You can tell them, hey, don't do that, and you have to say please after that as well. At least that's what I had to do. A lot of times I had to go down there, plead with players, beg with players, come on, cooperate with me. I'm trying to work with your interests over here as well. And I think if we want more coaches, more mentors, the step up is where these organizations need to come in. And I think this is where the second thing of how this time transition happens as well. The League of Legends community was a very young community, and I think that there's one thing that all Singaporeans go through that no other country, at least in the region, has, and that's national service. And national service, there's a leadership training school, known as OCS or SISPEC. You go in there, you become a sergeant, you become an officer, and I think there are very valuable communication leadership skills that can be picked up from this. And I think this can be a very hot and controversial topic. So what are your thoughts on this? Is NS, so 2 factors to make more leaders and coaches appear in the scene to help these players and make this transition from amateur to pro. One is organizations stepping in and legitimizing coaching. Second thing is national service. Over time, these players they go into NS, they become sergeants, they become officers, they come out, and then the leadership skills they gain in NS helps them. Sorry, I went in a circle over there. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I do actually agree with your point that through NS we pick up a lot of leadership, very applicable leadership skills that will translate directly to our coaching approach. So that's classic examples. I'm also from leadership school in Army from SCS. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it had a big impact in the way that I coach, but it helped me find a lot of the courage to actually step up and take responsibility for a lot of things that I'm currently doing. So I do really agree with the point that yeah, leadership through NS really helps a lot of the players. But the issue then goes back to how many players are actually willing to stay after, or how many of these mentors to be are willing to stay after NS, because it's a long period of time that you're spending in there, and some of them might even lose their interest or passion for the game.
I think this is where organizations come in and say that, hey, you used to be a really good player for this game, you were spec in the army, and then now you've just ORD'd. So Richard Chu, Sniper RC, I think he just ORD'd recently as well, was a spec as well. We'd be interested in coming in this coaching or mentorship program here.
Okay, I think these are all really good thoughts, and let's ask somebody from the the organization themselves. So Jafe, I know you have to head off really soon, but I think you're in a good position, especially because you talked about marketing esports. So this whole aspect of mentoring is also yet another aspect of developing the industry more. What do you think about that? Can an organization, should we expect an esports organization to provide this kind of legitimacy through coaching and mentoring, whether programs or trainings? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a good thing, of course. If you think about it, in Resurgence we have Rain as our coach. That's the first step to improve the players' gameplay. We have invested money in marketing strategy for our players. We have invested in self-help. I myself am a caster, so I can help with that personality development, whether it's how to present yourself, because sometimes in this industry, a lot of the players, before they even get sponsors, they need to ask themselves a very simple question. Oops, I think I got a large crowd behind me. Hang on, let me relocate. So by the way, in case you guys are wondering, I'm on mobile. So if you hear weird noises, 99% of the chance it's me. Okay, so basically, I feel that it is an important thing to have this kind of support for players. In RSG, we provide professional coaching from Rain. I don't know if Rain would be effective if I say it's really good coaching that he's providing. On my side, I am giving marketing. I'm giving something along the lines of self-help, self-improvement, how to present. And back to the point I was trying to make just now is that a lot of players, you want sponsors. We get that, yeah? Everyone loves their sponsor, loves to have representation. You want to have those kind of support given to you. But you got to always ask yourself, why must they invest in you? And what can you do to help yourself, make yourself look good for them, for yourself, both ways, right? So having this kind of support, I think, is going to help the player develop himself a lot further. I don't think that there's enough of such efforts being run in Singapore at the moment. Skoga is trying to do something there as well. Apart from that, I don't think anything else is coming into play. But I would say that this is an integral part of the support that an organization should give to the players if you want to really develop them. And that again depends on whether or not the player wants to be developed, whether or not the player is willing to listen. In Singapore, there's a lot of people who don't listen, people who think they know better, people who act smart maybe,
Sure.
and just being very negative. So coming in with an open mind surely helps. Willingness to improve is gonna really help that as well. But to answer your question, yep, organizations should push for that.
And I think just to push you a little bit more on that, to tie in what you said about, you know, marketing and how we need to support local. Crazy idea. Would you be willing to say to go down to a campus and be like, okay, all you esports clubs are gonna run like a 1-day workshop on how to be an effective coach? Like, have you considered doing something like that?
How to be an effective coach in the game or what?
Or yeah, I mean, so definitely an effective game coach, but I think we're talking now kind of even wider than that, right? Self-management is something that came up a lot in our conversation. So I'm just thinking about, I mean, I think what you're doing within the organization is really great, but we also considering how do we affect, you know, ground change, societal change, because, you know, you want to reach out to people and change their mentalities before they even join the organizations, right?
I would say that that's a really good effort, but for myself personally, I may not have the time and I may not be the most qualified to be in that role.
But it's an interesting thought, right? To get it out there to the campuses. And, okay, sure.
I agree. I'm just a BlizzCon caster, nothing too really.
Whoa.
Right.
No, I'm serious. I don't think I am.
That humble brag.
No, it's a humble biscuit now. But the key thing is, I don't think I'm qualified to really give that kind of talk. You know, there are better self-help mentors out there. There are better self-improvement coaches out there. People who do real mental training, which I think helps. People who do development on presentation. People who are professionals who teach CEOs how to pitch ideas. And I think that Toastmasters is doing a great job with that. So I'm just recognizing that there's a lot more qualified people that can run a better job than whatever I can possibly provide.
Sure.
So
very, very humble of you, and it's food for thought about whether, you know, we can connect with some of these people and then help them see, you know, the connections there. That's an interesting consideration. Far too big for our time tonight, but I think it's an interesting food for thought. Yeah. Okay, so guys, we are up to around 11:40 now. I know we said we'd try and, you know, keep this to around an hour and a half and around 2 hours max. So I think now is a good time just to get any last thoughts out there before, you know, maybe Jensen, you can do a little bit of summarizing of what you feel were some of the main points. You know, I put a little bit of a summary in the sidebar as well, for you guys to look through some good questions I think that have come out from our time here.
I think let's before we try to sum things up, let's move on to the last topic we was kind of supposed to talk about. Like, we talked a lot about marketing and how this very vague, this black box of marketing functions as a whole. But we highlighted the problem in marketing is the extremely absurd cost of viewer acquisition very early on in this discussion. So let's talk a little bit about solutions for this before we wrap things up.
Okay.
So I mean, I think to start things off, I think we should look at things regionally. So I mean, 2016 I did DTL. I'm not sure if we're the first professional organization, but we were a profitable organization. We actually made quite a fair amount of money running DTL in 2016. But the thing here is that we stopped operations because we didn't see it being profitable in the long run. Because of the same problem, goes back to high cost of viewership, and we are looking at doing a more regional strategy, looking at doing what EVOS is doing at the moment, moving operations to Vietnam. You can host something in Singapore, you base things in Singapore, but you do your operations overseas. And I think for events as well, I mean, we haven't even talked about events at all this entire thing. We are seeing a lot of these events pop up, but they're a one-time thing. We saw the Nanyang Championship appear, we saw the Worlds Qualifiers appear once, and then they never came back. So, are we looking even at, say, the possibility of running an organization in Singapore and doing events, maybe in, say, Johor Bahru, and then we just ferry people across the Causeway because it's just cheaper that way?
I mean, I'm not gonna be able to answer that question, but I'm gonna make it even worse by adding another point, which makes it another question makes it harder. Like, I think Reginald was very recently quoted in saying that an LCS spot and an LCS win is worth more to TSM than winning Worlds, and that's kind of true. Like, your sponsors want you to do well locally. A sponsorship locally, let's say a local company like Carousel sponsors you. Yes, they might branch out internationally later on, but they're not really going to care if you are doing well at Worlds unless you can back it up with the viewership of the amount of people from Singapore that are watching that broadcast, which is very difficult. So again, it's the chicken and egg scenario of, yes, sponsorship is going to help the league, help them grow, but if there's no meaning into winning a local title, which of course there still is, still a lot of pride and glory, and a lot of weight lies in winning the local TLC, but it's just such a difficult problem that even I can't wrap my head around it very well.
So you're saying that a team has to win for a team to be well sponsored?
No. Of course not. Of course not. I don't think a team has to win to be well sponsored, but sponsors and teams, once teams grow, value that local win, value that local representation, doing well locally, way more than internationally. So it's a very complex problem. Originally, I thought that moving towards an EU LCS format, the current, not the one that is going to be implemented in the future, but the current format where you have so many different teams from different countries playing in one league, which is the European League, I thought if that was introduced to Southeast Asia, would have helped out every region, maybe barring Vietnam, who has a very strong local following. I think every other region would have benefited from that. But it's difficult for me to wrap my head around such a complex problem that exists in Singapore at the moment.
I mean, we can't affect what Garena does or what Riot does. We can complain about it, we can write them letters and stuff, but let's keep things within the context of what an organization can do given the hand they're dealt. So that's why I'm saying, should we look at moving operations to maybe say, hey, you know what, let's just we base ourselves in Singapore, but we operate in Vietnam. Like, that's what EVOS is doing. I think
Indonesia.
In Indonesia as
Indonesia
well.
and Vietnam.
Yeah, their base is in Indonesia.
Is that going to be the future of esports in Singapore? And then if you're a good Singaporean player, you go to these organizations, and then you go over there, and then you're paid on the Indonesian pay scale.
That is a scary thought.
Yes. Then when it's time for you to come back to Singapore, then you're screwed because you paid in, local
I mean, we
currency.
talked about removing the safety net and going all in. This is as all in as it gets.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
that's
fly
all
them
in
over there, and then you burn the plane in front of them. You either win the tournament or
You win or don't come home.
Why don't you ask the guy who was the ex-pro player here? So, sorry, who was the ex-competitive player here? Rain, would you do it?
Do what? Do what again?
you meant Hammy too.
Would you go to Vietnam? Will we go to Vietnam and earn $500 Sing a month?
USD.
Or what? For coaching? Or
Playing.
Coaching or playing, whichever. Yeah, but let's say you're doing it as a player. You're doing it as a player.
I'm not.
Shock.
Dude, look at
You-
you sweat, man.
I'm not a person that's driven by a lot of extrinsic motivation. So for me, I think I might actually do it if I can learn a lot from the Vietnamese players. It's the same like when I went over to Thailand. I learned super lot of stuff, a lot of key knowledge and concepts that I would not have been able to pick up if I would have just stay locally.
I mean, in that case, you're kind of hedging your bets and saying, okay, I'm going to go over to Vietnam, make a name for myself, then perhaps I can move over to maybe say Taiwan or something else where it can offer me a better pay, right? That's kind of the idea. So
Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily think that is the end of the road for Singaporean teams. We can see ourselves as kind of a scouting ground for wildcards as well, for wildcard talent as well. Because in this case, if like EVOs now, they have a monopoly on Singaporean talent. If they want to say, let's bring Singaporean players to Indonesia, let's bring Singaporean players to Vietnam, any Singaporean talent, they've only got one place to go, is to EVOs.
I mean, it puts an interesting spin on what we talked about marketing as well, right? Suddenly you're like, oh, this team is doing so well. These Singaporeans, where are they? Oh, they're in Vietnam. Like, what? Wait, what? What? How did that happen? I mean, maybe it'll start some conversations about what they're doing in Vietnam, why they had to go there, but I mean, it was just something that came to my mind, like, whoa, yeah.
Jackie, any thoughts?
I feel like organizations should venture not only in Singapore, it should be a Southeast Asia thing. Because generally the market here is really too small. You can still do something in Singapore. I believe eVoS does something in Singapore. But the issue still lies with we probably don't have enough people who's willing to sacrifice that much. And like what you say, 500 USD for a month for any Singaporean currently. Maybe Rain is the exception, I guess, but offer that to anyone out there, probably you get 90% rejection from there on. So
I would have done it as well, by the way.
Yeah, you're probably at 10%, I guess.
If I was good enough, I probably would have done that back in the day as well.
Correct.
You did go to Indonesia.
It's about how you sell this.
No,
See
don't,
you.
we don't talk
Chat,
about
people in the
that.
chat.
We don't talk
People in
about
the
that
chat.
because I actually did that.
Oh my god.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
I did. I actually went over to Indonesia to play in a competitive tournament, the first ever competitive tournament there, and I was offered to actually stay on one of the teams, and I said I would, and I told him to get back to me. That guy, however, he stopped working for that org, so I never ended up doing it.
Count your blessing there.
Lucky you.
Lucky me.
Can I quickly poll the people in the chat? Would you do it $500 a month to go to Indonesia to play for a team there? You won't necessarily win or whatsoever, but eVoS comes to you and say $500 a month. Will you take it?
Keep in mind, you can live off $500 a month in Indonesia. That is
Yeah,
the starting. That is 500 Singapore dollars. 5 years ago, I don't know what it is now, but 5 years ago, that is the starting pay for an undergrad in Indonesia. So it's not like you're being cheated away. You can still live a very very comfortable life there.
Especially if you're going with an organization that provides you lodging and everything, right? So.
Yeah, we should include that.
So
but
that's a good point, yeah.
It also depends on at which point of your life are you at. Like, for example, I think Jackie wouldn't be able to do it because he has a wife and kid to feed. And at this point of my life, I can't go back and be a coach or be a pro player for $500 a month. That wouldn't make financial sense to me, because unless I intend to stay there for the rest of my life or I intend to migrate, then when I come back, I will have nothing. Unless the Singapore scene grows enough for me to come back and coach here, then there's the transition there. If not, when I come back and I have to start from scratch again, and I have no savings, then you're screwed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point that you bring up, Hammy, in terms of the time in life you consider this. We talk about university gap years, right? So I'm a fourth-year student now, and I know a lot of my peers that took gap years for a whole bunch of different things, and yeah, I mean, some of them were very driven. Some of them had their own agendas and their own goals that they pursued really strictly. But I'm also wondering, what happens if you take a gap year with an organization who's okay, here's a very clear plan. Yeah, you're gonna get, maybe not that much money or whatever. It's subjective, right? How much is much money to somebody? But it's a very clear plan. Give me 1 year of your time, right? Using what you said, Hammy. Give me 1 year of your time. We're gonna go. We're gonna boot camp. We're gonna train. We're gonna compete. And after 1 year, you evaluate. I mean, that's an interesting thing to consider, where you're not asking them to, it goes back to what we said about balance, right? You're not asking them to sell their soul to esports, but you're saying, give yourself 1 year, give me 1 year, give Singapore 1 year. For this 1 year, can we create a narrative and focus on this team that is, migrating to Vietnam or Indonesia? Do up the storyline, do up the narrative. Can organizations pull their weight in those areas? I mean, I think that's really... what do you guys think about that kind of thing? Would that be something that could possibly work?
If you talk about League of Legends currently in Singapore or Southeast Asia as a whole, I would say no. But if you're talking about games, probably Dota 2, it might work because of the amount of tournaments that is happening everywhere now. and everyone is free to join all the tournaments. Most of the tournaments, I mean. So
yeah.
All right, hold up,
Yeah,
guys. Hold up. Sorry, I gotta
that's-
cut in because Jake's gotta go.
that's-
So I think let's have him say his goodbyes and we can send him off.
wow, sounds weird. Bye, Jay.
Bye, Jake.
Bye-bye.
Any final thoughts? If not, we'll see you. Thank you for coming onto the show.
You have been voted off the island.
Any final?
Hey, still here. All right. Sorry, gotta go. It's midnight, so Cinderella, gotta tell. Okay. All the best, and I definitely hope that you guys had some good insights from today's talk, at least from my perspective. I just want to round it up by saying that from my point of view is that I feel that everyone can do their part, whether big or small. From the organization point of view, like for mine, I'm giving whatever kind of support I can to the players who really want to achieve what they feel like is worth achieving. For the players, you cannot expect things to fall on your lap. You're going to have to try and do your best regardless of the results, right? And for the organizers, which is Garena in this sense, I really hope that they have a plan to work together with everyone in the community, not just the organization, but also the players. And last but not least, to the fans who are watching this video and to the fans who are, or not fans, the people watching this video, I hope that you can support esports by at least attending the event, tuning in, watching, and I think that's the least you could do, right? And that's about it. So thanks guys for having me.
Bye,
And,
Jay.
All right. Thanks, Jake.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
As Jay leaves, I have something I want to bring up. I don't really want to go deep into it because it would be a whole new discussion, but I think it's something really cool to ponder over. Dot Esports put out a really good video, which I know Jensen and I, the Chrisman and I have lots of conversations about, which is the difference in price pool structure comparison of Dota 2 as well as League of Legends. The main difference is, for case purpose of this, is Dota 2 invests a lot of money into prize pool, so if you do well, you prosper, basically. Whereas League of Legends is more salary based, so most players they'd be closer in terms of salary, but you can still prosper and still do very well if you win tournaments by collecting what is still a relatively large prize pool. Removing the game titles, maybe the model of winner takes all, so to speak, in Singapore could potentially be the way to go with the sustainability that orgs currently face. Might not be good for organizations, but it might be good for the players themselves because they only have 1 or 2 years maybe due to national service, or they might not have that much time to invest themselves heavily into esports. Maybe with a structure of a heavy focus on prize pool, there is the potential that they can go big or go home and get the best of both worlds.
Right.
Yeah, which is why I mentioned, right? So Dota 2 have these constant tournaments coming in every month. It's like in Malaysia you'll find one with a decent prize pool probably every week. But in Singapore you don't get any tournaments. So it's a longevity thing, right? So if there's a constant prize pool out there, I think people is willing to give it a shot. But for League now in Singapore, we're probably getting one tournament a year. Two. And people won't try for that.
I mean, because it makes sense internationally, right? If you look at the NALCS or EULCS or the LCK, it makes sense, the structure which Riot's doing over there. But at the moment, it probably doesn't make sense for Singapore.
Yep. I mean, the old GPL used to be doing pretty well, but I mean, we do have a league scene to begin with in the first place. I believe so. We have only have a certain amount of teams that can probably do decently. So yeah, if you ask me, I'll go Dota 2, and then we can sacrifice whatever we can, and then 1 year, 2 years, if we don't, we have something to fall back on. Yeah.
So that's the thing about the structure in Dota 2. It doesn't require you to be an organization. You can start off as a team, and then you work your way up. You go in there, you play the tournaments, you finish maybe say top 8, not in the big prize money finish, but good enough for somebody to notice you. Doesn't have to be a sponsor, but somebody saying, hey, I think you guys have got talent. Then bring them together, give you guys some support, and then you build on from that, and then slowly you pick up whatever you can along the way. So perhaps I think structure does play a part in that as well.
Definitely. I mean, how was Dreamscape actually became Boot Dreamscape? It's because they had a lot of exposures. They went to different tournaments, different countries, and Boot saw them in Malaysia while they were playing the ROG tournament. So the owners actually thought that this team has a lot of potential, just no support. So they decided to come in and support Dreamscape, and now look at where Dreamscape now. You see, so organizations do have a part to play to give the support that teams need to actually grow. And I think Dreamscape is a very good example for our local teams that if you try hard enough, you can do it. I mean, knowing Anthony, I mean, he sacrificed so much, and look at where he is now. So it really depends on. It has to be a both way thing. I mean, organization can only do so much. I mean, yeah. So, yep.
Let's try to wrap things up in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think you look at. I think Daryl Pay from the chat actually mentioned this very interesting thing, right? So most people change rosters team after losing one tournament. I think that's I think that's one.
We see that so
yeah,
often.
yeah. I mean, that's one reason, right? That our team are not doing well, but that's why we have to look at Dreamscape as a very good example. They stick together no matter what's the result like. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
I think it's a great point. I mean, Jackie, when you're talking about, what I was thinking when you're raising your points is that the kind of resilience in our esports industry is a bit lacking. And Jensen, I think we've had this conversation a couple of times too, which is exactly what Daryl Pay mentioned, which is that we lose, and whether it's from the organization perspective, as an investor, maybe you get a bit scared and you're like, okay, I think we should consider our options in terms of pulling out. Or as a player, you're like, okay, crap, we lost. It's time to find like a better team. But there's very little commitment, and I wonder, again, this is food for thought. I'm not sure if we can problem solve this tonight, but like, what do you do it in the form of, say, better contracts or whatever? But whatever it is, it just seems like the resilience in the industry is a little bit lacking. I mean, I don't want to downplay the amount of money that goes into it, right? This is people's money. It is still I guess, a budding industry in Singapore, so it is going to require a lot of initial capital investment. I recognize that, but it just feels that, the grit to stick through the tough times is something that I think we do need to see a bit more of in the industry.
Definitely.
Can we get a closing statement from everybody? So, I mean, we want to keep this within the 2 hours, as I promised everyone. From everybody, give a closing statement as to what do you think. I mean, after all the discussion we've had, what do you think organizations can do to help the Singaporean scene in a sustainable way, of course? Not say, okay, let's make money rain from the sky.
Dang it, Jensen, you took my point. Okay. No,
I mean, in all honesty, it's going to sound like a cop-out answer for me going in this manner, but I would say do what you can. Like, no matter how little or how much you can do for the esports scene, if you have that passion, you have that drive, you have something to give, do it. Even if it's something very small, I still say it's worth it. It still builds the scene in one way or another, and hopefully if we get enough people doing that, eventually we can grow something great.
Who's going next?
I'm typing, so not me.
Maybe I'll just chip in real quick. I think I don't really speak on behalf of Resurgence, but I think that for Resurgence, we are also trying to nurture the next batch or generation of talent or upcoming players, which is why I'm not so sure if you guys realize that we recently also opened applications for a new fresh batch of players to come on board and to join and learn together with us. So I think everyone in the community is trying to do their part to help out in this aspect to learn and grow as a whole. So if you don't mind actually coming down to try and learn with us, then just feel free to just go and check out our Facebook page. Yeah.
Sell out.
It's not. I hope it's not a sell out.
So Rain, sorry, can you clarify the context of that? Are you talking players specifically, or like different roles even within the organization?
Yeah, different roles. I think we're looking for analysts as well. a lot of different positions within the organization. So if you feel like you can contribute to the organization as well, feel free to join. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Who's going next?
I think I can go next because, I mean, what Rain says is actually very similar to my closing thoughts. I think one great thing that came out from this conversation is that I think maybe as we mature or grow older, we do look at, you know, the industry from a more mature and balanced perspective. And I think that organizations and those of us who have had, say, more experience in the industry do need to reach out to those that are just starting to consider it, those that are very new, or you know, whether it's friends or family or societal perspectives that do need to understand how the industry works, and then be the ones to actually, you know, do that mentoring, do that coaching. Whether or not you want to do it in a formal organization, if you have one, fantastic. If not, in your own unofficial ways, I think to mentor somebody is something that can really go even beyond, I think, impacting, you know, a person's perspective on gaming. It's really about a life perspective that you can help train somebody in, and not to put too much pressure on yourself, you know, to train the person in their whole life, but it's just to say that I think that if we have a certain more mature perspective, these are some really big considerations that don't get brought into conversations about gaming or esports often enough, and we can be people to start those conversations and structure them eventually if need be. Yeah.
I think I can go next. Let Jackie.
You want to go next?
Huh? Why?
I don't know.
I finished typing what I wanted to
Yeah,
say.
that's why I saw.
So basically, I think with the recent introduction of new teams and everything, and you know, more professional organizations coming, I think it's more important to provide constructive criticism or constructive feedback rather than, you know, just arguing or having discussions for the sake of boosting your own ego or boosting your arrogance. And I think one of the most important things that I would like to share, or what I've always shared with people, is that you have to always be sharing your ideals and the proper ethics in esports. And you know, you shouldn't always be saying that oh, the community is toxic and you know, we can't change, everyone is cancer, everyone is salty. But you know, the fact that you are saying that, you know, you are contributing to the problem. So if you stop and you change, you encourage people, you start affecting people around you first, and then, you know, it starts spreading, and then hopefully the community becomes less, you know, and from like you said, as we grow up and we mature and we all start working in different organizations and companies, you know, expectations change. And what I can say is that, you know, as a young player, to the young players out there, you shouldn't expect too much from organizations and teams and sponsorships first, but you have to give it your all first, and then, you know, everything else will come with time. So just be patient, and be the change that you want to see. So yeah, that's all.
I'll let Fish go last. I'll go first.
That's still me.
Yo, Fish went first.
I already went.
Fish went robot. Okay, fine. I'll go first. So, okay. So for organization, right? I think, okay. For individuals, let's be very open to all the new players coming in. I mean, Chaos Theory, Resurgence, Impunity is doing well. So let's be very open and be very supportive of, regardless of results, regardless of how they fare in tournaments, locally, regionally, and stuff like that. And for all the organizations that I have encountered recently, I think we are all trying very hard. So, like going to mentoring sessions and stuff like that. This is the path that everyone, each individual organization would actually go into soon. So let's just be patient, and we're not hoping for the best. We believe that changes will be there soon, and we believe that in Singapore, esports will be viable one day. So being toxic doesn't help. So just let's be supportive of the scene. I mean, even if you just attend the event if you can, and we see support, brands see the support, and we'll see a lot more investors coming in. Yeah. Fish or Jason?
I'll go next. I think I've covered a lot of the points that I want to talk about. It's about organizations looking at things regionally. I think individuals needing to realize that as well. That it's just very difficult for organizations to operate solely within Singapore itself, and that organizations will need to look at operations in Johor Bahru for maybe events and stuff like that. Or say do like what Evo was just doing, go to Vietnam, go to Indonesia. So maybe instead of learning Japanese as a third language, maybe go pick up Vietnamese, go pick up Bahasa, and that might pay off in the long run if you're serious about say doing esports or getting a career in these spaces, or maybe even say Chinese as well. Because I mean, from what I know, it's very difficult to get into NA. It's very difficult to get in Europe, but there's a very big scene in China as well. And if you want to say what the role of organizations can be in order to build the scene, I'm not really sure if like say exporting players is considered building the scene, but I mean that works for me. Work in those areas, work with those things, and realize that think regionally, think on a global scale. Don't over focus on okay, this is Singapore, think set in Singapore, and work with what you can do. Yeah, that's what I have to say. Because I just think at the end of the day, it's not just esports, creatives, and I think sports as well. They're struggling in Singapore. They have been struggling for some time already. And I don't think, although there's all this hype for esports, I wouldn't necessarily say that it will deviate from the trend from what is a very crappy entertainment industry in Singapore as a whole. Okay. And
I don't think Fish is around.
I am.
You already made it.
Oh, you are? Okay.
He was the first to go, I think.
Wow, Jackie. Wow.
Oh,
He's
I'm
not even
sleepy.
listening.
no, I am, but I'm sleepy.
I'm just gonna wait for Mark to come back, and then we get it.
Mark is walking in right now.
Don't tell him. Don't tell him anything. Don't tell Mark what. No.
Yeah, don't. Shh.
Okay, Mark.
Do you know? Yeah. What's up?
I think let's call an end to this, and then
Sure.
we'll debrief after you take the stream offline.
No problem. No problem. All right. So thank you all of you who gave your precious time for this. Not just those of you, those of us gathered here, but those joining us on the YouTube channel as well. We really actually, I mean, there's no way we can cover all the thoughts and responses that you guys brought up there, but just briefly looking through them, there are so many good things from there as well. So this is very encouraging, right? We're talking about do what you can to contribute to the scene, and this is one of the ways, guys. We do hope that this is in some sense encouragement or inspiration for you guys to go and contribute in your own ways. So thanks everybody for your time, and I think we'll end it here. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Wow.
See, mate.
Okay, I'll try to keep this within 15 minutes, and if Jackie, I think if you need to go, you can go first. But I
It's
just
okay.
want to get
Okay,
quick
I'm
feedback
stopping the stream
on
now.
Please do, please.